In many previous videos, we've discussed some of the easiest to obtain mounts in WoW's history. With 3 parts in the series, we've covered over 30 mounts and then some. But the last video was about 4 years ago now. So it's about time we get back to it and talk about some more of the easily acquired mounts that have slipped under your radar. To begin this list, we're actually going to have 2 mounts, the aerial unit R21/X and the Tazavesh Gearglider. If you were scrolling through the mount journal and came across the aerial unit, you'd see it drops in the final boss of the Mechagon Mega Dungeon instance. Upon further investigation in the loot journal though, you'd find there was no such mount that drops from King Mechagon. There's the Peacekeeper mount, but this isn't the aerial unit. So what gives? Well, Blizzard has made it tradition in their Mega Dungeon instance to have an optional hard mode that players can opt into. These Mega Dungeons are usually just like how they sound, and they're basically 2 dungeons packed into one, boss counts included. The tuning and mechanics of the dungeon are typically much more difficult than the average dungeon as well, so think of it kind of like a 5-man raid boss situation. Hard mode will then involve the player conquering extra mechanics on top of the already challenging bosses. As a reward for overcoming the hard mode challenge, you are usually given a special mount showing off your accomplishment. Sometimes there's a couple of prerequisites to the mount other than just zoning in and having a tougher time, but these usually aren't super complicated. For the case of Mechagon and BFA and Tazavesh and Shadowlands, both of these dungeons had their own hard modes, so only a select few players were able to get it while it was current content. The funny thing is though, that despite this feeling like a mount Blizzard would remove eventually to get more players to try out the content, it's stayed in the entire time. Nowadays, you can just walk into the Mega Dungeon and complete it on hard mode on a max level character that massively outscaled the content and collect an easy mount. To do the hard mode, all you need to do is fight every single boss with the aerial unit itself still actively flying over them. Then, when you reach the HK8 encounter, you may actually need a second person to help you out, or get a little lucky. There's a mechanic that can one-shot you regardless of your level here, but it can be worked around easily with a second body. Normally, after you kill the Tankbuster unit, you have to go towards either the north or south pylons and complete a hack cast to interrupt the one-shot beam that's charging up. On hard mode, you only have 55 seconds instead of the usual 3 minutes, so any stun or slight mess up getting to the beam can kill you. After that, you just move to Kujo, click the robot waste on the ground, and just nuke the boss. Same for what follows the Robo-Dog until King Mechagon himself. He actually has a pretty unique set of hard mode mechanics that can one-shot you too, but if you're geared just enough or have a partner, you can bring him down in seconds before the mechanics even occur. After this, you'll have your aerial unit mount. Basically, just go in and beat up everything you see. It's basically the same just for the Tazavesh mount as well. Just kill the first boss and then head downstairs to the right until you find the questionable trader. You'll purchase the fraudulent credentials and then head to the Oasis Center to obtain the password and enter the club inside. Once inside, you'll turn in your fraudulent credentials for passably forged credentials from Almanal. You will now just need a fresh instance of Tazavesh and speak to Fetajits at the entrance, thus beginning your hard mode journey. And to be honest, all of the bosses can just fall over in no time and you'll soon bun your way for the mount. The only slight problem might occur with Solea, as she will become immune to all damage at around 40% and heal herself to full. The only way to remove this damage mitigation she possesses is to hit every single relic in the fight at the same time with the red arrow indicators. This means you would need 5 players, including yourself, to actually do this hard mode in full if damage seems to be an issue for you. However, if your class is able to do an insane amount of burst, you could kill Solea in just a few hits to prevent the intermission from even happening in the first place, netting you the fake it till you make it achievement, and giving you the mount in the process. It takes a bit more steps than most other easy to get mounts in WoW, but a lot of people seem to miss it, thinking they were possibly just removed or never there to begin with. And at number 9, we have the Xiwyllag ATV. Now, you'd think for a mount with an anagram of Galliarix's name in it, it wouldn't have any place appearing in an easy to obtain list. It makes sense to just assume this was a massive gold sink for players, and maybe Blizzard had someone intended this originally. To craft this mount, you would need to combine both the blacksmithing and engineering professions. Blacksmiths would need to create the monolite reinforced chassis, which is a recipe that drops from Kujo and Mechagon. Engineers had the supercharged engine from the same boss, but both were a pretty low drop rate. Now, you could run to the auction house right now and see how much these parts are to put them together and get your mount, but this would be making a huge mistake. Oftentimes, people are hoping you don't know better when you're doing your research on this mount and think you'll need to buy the parts and to charge you an insane amount of gold for them. The reality is that this is because the mount has existed since BFA. Many people have learned the recipe and crafted the mount thousands of times over, significantly decreasing its value. You can actually just buy the mount itself on the auction house, usually for less than 20,000 gold nowadays, making it as one of the more obtainable mounts in WoW's history. Back in the day, it required the usage of rare crafting materials expulsum, which typically only came from scrapping armor from that expansion and killing difficult bosses in Mythic Plus and raids. Now that BFA is legacy, these drop all the time, and the other necessary materials like monolite ore are dirt cheap on the auction house. The cooler thing is you can actually change up the color of this mount, making it a pseudo-predecessor to the mount customizations we know today from Dragonflight and beyond. It was absolutely much more limited, but you had the option for Nuclear Red, Goblin Green, and Electric Blue, making it one of the first mounts to ever be interchangeable in the game. So ironically, the namesake of Jaster Gallywix himself is one of the cheapest and easiest to get mounts in WoW. Who would have thought? And at number 8, we have the Jewelcrafting Panthers. Added to Mista Pandaria, Blizzard had continued to innovate their jewel crafting profession from TBC. It wasn't the first time profession was able to craft a mount for players, but it was jewel crafting's first. To obtain the recipe for any of these 4 Panther mounts, you must be honored with the Order of the Cloud Serpent reputation. With things like Time Walking existing, and if you were an apt player during Mob Remix, you may have already gotten this reputation maxed out, removing the grind. After this, you will need 4 Living Steel, 2 Serpent's Eye, 20 of the associated gem with the Determined Panther, and a single Orb of Mystery. This Orb of Mystery can be bought in the auction house, but its only source is a vendor named Big Quiche in the Vale of Eternal Blossom. He will only sell you this orb for 20,000 gold, but this is the biggest gold sink you're going to face when it comes to these 4. You'll have to purchase the orb once per mount, but it really depends on your want for the mount count. If you want to skip this process, you can just head to the auction house and look up the Gemmed Panthers and buy whichever you like the most. These typically will only go for a bit over 20,000 gold, considering they have to include the rep farm additional mats for the crafting cost to at least somewhat make a profit. But basically, for around 80,000 gold, you can get 4 more mounts added into your collection. And at number 7, we have Deathrunner. Added in patch 9.2 Eternity's End from Shadowlands, this mount came as reward from the brand new protoform synthesis profession. While technically a profession, it functioned basically the exact way any other profession would, involving multiple recipes, crafted materials, and a relatively central location where the items had to be made. To unlock their protoform synthesis, you would have to progress the Ars Mortis campaign to at least the first chapter, and then you'd be given access to the Cipher Council. This interface is basically just an overall upgrade system to your outdoor experience in the Zereth Mortis zone, but is entirely optional. To upgrade its tiers, you'll need to collect a currency called Ciphers of the First Ones, which drop from basically any rare, treasure, world quest, or Sepulchre of the First One bosses. Using these, you can research the Deathrunner Understanding section. After spending 200 ciphers, you can then start a short quest line that shows you the basics of the protoform synthesis as a whole. In this process, you'll be provided the necessary materials to craft your first mount in the facility via the Tools of the Incomprehensible Experimentation and Servant Lattice. Now, normally you have to go through some pretty heavy lengths to loot these items, but Blizzard themselves will just give you these for the introduction, netting you Deathrunner in the process. Plus, you can now craft the many other mounts associated with the protoform synthesis, 24 in total if you're curious. But a lot of these mounts are a pretty large grind as opposed to how simple Deathrunner is. We recommend checking out a more in-depth guide telling you how to craft each and every one, something like Wowhead or Icy Veins if you want to expand your collection some more now than your profession is unlocked. And at number 6, we have all the Dragonriding Mounts. Well, it's actually called Skyriding now, but we more specifically mean the mount rewards from Dragonflight campaign. When you begin your journey into the Dragon Isles, it doesn't take long to eventually be given your renowned Protodrake mount. This is the vessel that introduces you into Skyriding system, which allows you to soar at wild speeds across the world of Azeroth with legitimate physics attached to it. So, the Waking Shores for the Protodrake, Windborn Velocidrake in the Unharmed Plains, Highland Drake in the Azure Span, and finally the Cliffside Walderfrake in Thaldraszus. These mounts are insanely customizable, and the only true limitation is your own imagination. The plus side to getting these is you literally just have to play through the main quest in the Dragon Isles at least once. Your type of skill level doesn't even really matter, and it's very likely if you're a new player, you already have come across these. Though, don't forget, Dragonflight also had a couple more of the original Dragonriding mounts that were obtained from endgame campaign quests instead. They can be pretty easy to skip out on these quests as they were completely optional if you were only a Mythic Plus player or a raider, especially since the rewards were a few chapters deep sometimes. Thankfully, the campaigns are no longer time-gated, so you just need to complete the quests as fast as you'd like, and you'll be on your way. In the Zarlek Caverns, you'll be given the Winding Slitherdrake. Very short into your Emerald Dream Journey, you'll also be given the Flourishing Whimsy Drake. And finally, yet probably the most infamous mount from the original bunch, is the Grotto Netherwing Drake. This dragon is an increased resolution version of the original TBC Nether Drake players were able to earn in the Dragon Ball Reputation dailies back in the day. Just like the others, it too can be customized to your heart's content. And the only real tough grind you'll be facing is how you want your dragons to look. The Netherwing can be learned from completing other various amounts of campaign quests, particularly dealing with the characters Veranoth and Wrathion in their attempts to recruit additional dragons to heed the call of the Isles. So for just a few hours of quest, you'll end up with 7 more mounts than when you started. So try not to avoid the Dragon Isles if you like having your mount count be higher. And at number 5, we have the Wildseed Cradle. Added at the launch of Shadowlands, this mount serves as a sort of palanquin that carries the player to the destination like they're a royalty. And some of you just might be, but you didn't hear it from me. To get this, you must journey to Ardenwald in the Shadowlands and the NPC Twinkle Star's Tools. You can find all these items roughly in the same area of the NPC, thankfully, and the most moving you're going to have to do was actually getting to Ardenwald in the first place. You'll need to get the Diary of the Night, Guardian's Hammer, Basket, Flute, and Wand. After you've acquired the 5 tools, you combine them to make Twinkle Star's Gardening Toolkit. Now, all you have to do is offer them up to the NPC in Turnaval, and she'll grant you the Moonsight buff, allowing you to see the cache of the moon located behind her. Just open the cache, and the Wildseed Cradle will be waiting for you. And that's literally all you have to do. And now you have one of the most unique mounts in WoW. This is partially thanks to the fact that Blizzard has never reused its model for another mount thus far, which is surprising because players seem to ask quite often for more mounts than just animals to carry them around. But even then, the Cradle can still skyride, so it's not like you're going to fall behind your teammates anytime soon. And at number 4, we have Magmashell. Just south of the Dragonscale base camp in the Waking Shores, you'll want to start farming as many lava snails, lava slugs, and lava slurpers as you possibly can. If it has lava in its name, it will most likely need to die by your sword. Eventually, you'll loot an empty Magmashell. Now you'll need to go to the Skullcracker Keep and wait for the empowered snail to spawn. It's usually about a 25 to 30 minute respawn timer, but you can realm hop if there's any pre-made groups in the area by chance. Once you find the snail, just jump into the lava to interact with it. This will then start a 20-second long cast called Embiggening Snail, which will normally kill you for being in the lava for too long. You can use abilities like Divine Shield before you jump into the lava and then click the snail to prevent damage. So it's advised to repeat a similar step to counter as much damage as possible before going in to prevent your death. It's that, or just have a healer friend on standby to keep it full health as you complete the cast. After the cast completes, you receive the Magmashell mount, and can use it however you want around your friends now. Basically, just kill a bunch of lava slugs and wait for another special slug to spawn, which typically only takes about an hour or so when combining the two. If you don't want to farm the slugs for the empty Magmashell, you can just buy it off the auction house, usually for around 1 to 2k gold at a time. And at number 3, we have the Stormhide Salamanther. There sure seems to be a lot of dragonflight mounts on this list, huh? It's a pretty far cry from what we saw in the Shadowlands. Anyways though, the Stormhide Salamanther is a vendor item from the NPC Mithrisa located in Valdrakken. It costs 2,000 elemental overflow, which may have cost quite a bit, because before it could only be obtained from the rotational Prisma Storms in various Dragon Isle zones. It was in a pretty limited stock at the time, but now it drops in an absolute abundance everywhere you go. Or at least that's the case when it comes to things like the Forbidden Reach Zone. In this area, doing basically anything will reward you with overflow currency in a manner that's similar to the Timeless Coins from the Timeless Isle. Rares, quests, treasures, etc, etc. Basically 2,000 overflow will equate to what feels like 10 minutes of gameplay in the Forbidden Reach. And the entire time this mount was just sitting there with its unchanged value. Who doesn't like a free mount? And at number 2, we have the Scrapforged Mechaspider. Rewinding to Mechagon a bit, this mount just comes from completing a series of daily quests in the Mechagon zone. Once you unlock the general story and campaign for Mechagon, you can begin a quest called Shop Project from an NPC named Recycler Kerchunk. You'll have a total of 12 quests to give you, but you can only complete 1 a day. So just have a single character posted there for a very short quest which can let you progress on this Mechaspider. These quests usually just involve you killing a couple mobs or looting special material items unique to Mechagon, but with it no longer being a max level zone, you'll find the area generally uncontested and easy to farm in. The only quest that may take a bit more farming than usual is the final, requiring you to craft the 500S Cybernetic Power Core, requiring 8 spare crates, 5 energy cells, and 8 chain igniter coils. Though, like mentioned just a bit earlier, you can earn these pretty passively from performing activities at Mechagon, and you may already have them all by the time this quest rolls around, especially since not many people will mess with your grind. After that, you'll get the WoW equivalent of a Star Wars X-Wing fighter added to your inventory. Just log in daily on the character, park the Mechagon, do a short quest, come back the next day, and repeat for just under 2 weeks for your mount. Can anyone really claim such a cool mount for such an easy acquisition method? Probably not, so that's why it's here at number 2. Hey you, are you tired of boring, predictable merch? Wouldn't you love it if you could have something more exciting? Something with a random chance to give you more than what you spent on it, but in a legally distinct way that's not gambling? Well, we have nothing like that for you, but we do have something pretty similar. Introducing the Duelogs TCG Mystery Box. It comes with playmats, card sleeves, a deck box, and not one, but 2 Duelogs mini plushies. Individually, all these items would cost over $130. But if you buy them all together in the mystery box, it's only $59.99. Being less than half the price if you bought everything individually on the Duelogs store. However, that's not all, because it also comes with a random rare Yu-Gi-Oh card, guaranteed to be either a staple or a high-value ticket item like Bonfire. Or your box might just contain a whole box of Infinite Forbidden instead. I mean, if you get that, technically each of these boxes is worth more than the entire box itself. Additionally, you also get a whole bunch of other random stuff, but only items that are from the store. If you don't care about card games though, we also have the D&D and Pokemon box just for you. Or if you want everything, there's also the Everything box, which just comes with one of everything from the merch store. Order yours today, check the link in the video description or the display under the video. And completing this list, we have the Slime Serpent at number 1. Originally one of the most infamous secret mounts in the game, players had pondered over its existence for many months when it was formally introduced in Shadowlands. It went around undiscovered for this time at a collection rate of 0%, because no matter what people theorize about the mount, it just wasn't the right way to collect it. That was until a random Beastmaster Hunter player, who just happened to be bored, decided to solo the last 2 bosses of the Plaguefall instance on heroic difficulty. This is when the mount suddenly dropped after the death of Margrave Stradama, that the hunter realized they had just discovered one of the most renowned secret mounts at the time by complete and utter accident. Once this discovery was made, news spread quickly across the player base, and everyone scrambled to log on a character that was capable of soloing the content. Mostly tanks. And an unannounced hotfix by Blizzard a few months later from this discovery, they instead made it so you now have to solo the entire Plaguefall instance on heroic or mythic difficulty, instead of just killing the last 2 bosses. This meant that basically only tanks were capable of completing the challenge, or really high burst classes, and killing any bosses with even a single partner would ruin the attempt. Thankfully though, the Slime Serpent was never actually removed, and instead remains a staple in the secret finding community of WoW. So now you can just log into any geared character that you have and kill all the bosses on heroic, steamrolling everything in sight. Then, when you reach the final boss, you'll be rewarded with a slimy green worm. It's super easy, and literally would only take you around 5 to 10 minutes at most, probably making it one of the easiest mounts to learn in the modern game right now. Alright, and this completes our list. Are there any other mounts you know of that should have made this list in place of another? If so, we'd love to hear about them down in the comments so we can make more versions of this video.